I'm sure you must have wondered at some point what makes a research study more trustworthy than another. Why are some studies cited and built upon while others just fade into obscurity? So the answer lies in the quality of the research itself. Now, in this lesson, we'll explore the criteria of good research, the essential features that ensure that a study is credible, it's useful, and capable of advancing knowledge. Every good research must have a clearly defined purpose. So a good research study begins with a clear and specific purpose. Now, this means that the research question or objective must be well defined so that both the researcher and the audience understand what the study seeks to investigate. So a vague and ambiguous aim leads to confusion, misinterpretation, and unreliable results. Now, when the purpose is clearly stated, it sets a strong foundation for the entire study. The second is operational definition of concepts. Now, every key concept used in the research must be operationally defined, and I'll explain what that means. It basically means defining abstract terms in measurable and observable ways. So you have a term that you're trying to study, and then you're trying to find a measurable and observable way to do it. So an example would be a study involving the measurement of anxiety. The researcher might specify how anxiety will be assessed, whether it's through a questionnaire or through behavioral observation by the psychologist himself, or whether it's going to be through measuring a physiological response, such as maybe having some kind of a BP monitor or maybe an MRI just to scan the brain. Whatever it may be, you have to define how you're going to measure that particular abstract concept, which in this case is anxiety. So operational definitions ensure that other researchers can replicate the study using the same standards, leading to consistency and clarity. So if your research is done by someone else and they've duplicated the same way that you have done it using the same machinery, the same form of measurements, then there should be a consistency in the result. If both of you have the same kind of result, then there's consistency and clarity. If the result varies and it's not the same, then your research and your hypothesis or your theory is not replicable. So the third point would be a well-structured research procedure. So good research does not happen by chance, and the procedures used in the study must be carefully planned and described in detail. So this includes the method of data collection, the tools and instruments that you would be using in this data collection, the steps followed during the study. So when procedures are well documented, other researchers can replicate or extend the study, which is essential for building a reliable body of scientific knowledge. Now, the fourth step would be to objectively design the research framework. So what does that mean? The research design should be constructed to maintain objectivity, avoiding any form of personal bias. So a good research design supports the collection of valid data, and then it allows the researcher to draw conclusions based on evidence and not personal beliefs or expectations. So the more objective the research framework, the more credible the results will be because it has not been touched by bias. Now, the fifth would be honest and transparent reporting. So how many of you know that even if you get your results that are a little different from what you've expected, you know how to sort of manipulate the data so that it looks like it matches with what your expectations are. What's important when you're doing a research is to have honest and transparent reporting. So crucial quality would be to maintain the integrity of the reporting. So the research report should be frank and transparent, acknowledging both strengths and limitations, and researchers must be willing to report unexpected results, limitations of their study, any sources of potential error, because this honesty allows readers and future researchers to gauge the trustworthiness of the findings and understand the broader context. Now, the sixth thing, I don't have enough fingers, but the sixth point is adequate and appropriate data analysis. So the data collected during the study must be analyzed thoroughly and meaningfully. Now, a good researcher would choose the right statistical or analytical method to interpret the data, and the analysis should reveal whether the findings are statistically significant, and I'll explain what that means. Statistically significant means whether it shows a major difference or there is a major change, a significant change. So we're always looking for a cause and effect relationship, right? So if a change in one aspect brings about a significant change in another, now the significant change could be anything between 50 to 100%. So knowing if there's enough of a change to show that there is a correlation between the two factors is important. And then we need to find what patterns or relationships are evident in it. So is there a direct relationship, as in an increase of one element will cause an increase of another element, or an increase of one has an inversely proportional relationship where when one increases, the other equally decreases. So these are the different relationships that are evident there. Then how the results relate to the original research question. So you remember we had a research question. We need to find out whether, let's say, loud noises increase anxiety. So that was our initial question, our research question. That's what we wanted to find out. So we need to look through all the data that we have collected, and after the statistical analysis, finally determine whether what this data is actually telling us in terms of the question that we had formulated in the beginning. So what insight does it shed on that question? Did we get data that says yes, when the sound increases, anxiety increases, or does it say that as the noise goes up, anxiety comes down, or is there no relationship at all? This is what we need to understand. Then good research also explains why specific methods are chosen and whether the results support the original hypothesis. So that's all the points there. Now the seventh point, and the main thing, is validity and reliability of data. This is how we determine whether this research that's been done is a good research. The seventh point is validity and reliability. So all good research must consider validity and reliability. Now, what do these two terms mean? Validity refers to whether the research actually measures what it claims to measure. So if you say that you're trying to measure anxiety and all you're measuring is just heart rate, and that's just one aspect, but it doesn't really tell you something, whether it's anxiety in itself, or maybe you're just measuring something else that's related to anxiety but not really anxiety itself. And reliability refers to whether the results can be consistently reproduced under the same conditions. So if you say that I'm studying anxiety and I want to study the relationship between anxiety and noise, and I am using so and so instruments, I'm using a questionnaire and I'm using physiological measurements to determine whether the anxiety is going up under noisy conditions, and this is how I plan to do my experiment, and I've very clearly given out the steps that I'm going to do. First, I'm going to seat them in a room. I'm going to make sure that the room is completely soundproof and there's no noise, and then gradually I'll increase the noise to this decibel and then this decibel. So you're structuring how the procedure of that experiment is going to be, and then you measure the outcome. How are you going to measure the outcome? What are the results that you got? Then you did your statistical analysis, and finally you determine that there's a relationship, there's a direct relation, a directly proportional relationship between anxiety and noise. So that means that every time noise goes up, anxiety goes up. And if noise goes down, then anxiety consistently comes down. That is your result, right? If you can have the same experiment redone by somebody else, another researcher in another place under the same conditions, and if the result comes very close to what you got, then that experiment or that research, the research that you have done, can be said to be reliable because it can be reproduced consistently under the same conditions. So validity would mean to make sure that you are measuring exactly what you intend to measure. So in this case, if you're trying to measure levels of anxiety, you should be able to make sure that the measurement that you're taking is of anxiety and not stress, And the reliability would mean consistently being able to replicate the same experiment again and again with the same results, as long as it's under the same conditions. So together, these two aspects ensure that the findings are credible, dependable, and meaningful. Now, without them, even the most impressive looking results could be misleading or unusable. So in summary, good research is not just about results, it's about the integrity of the process. So from a clearly defined purpose to honest reporting, and from well-planned procedures to rigorous analysis, each element plays a role in ensuring that research is valuable and trustworthy. Now, as students and future researchers in psychology, understanding this criteria will not just help you assess your existing studies, but also guide you in conducting your own high-quality research.